Well, good morning, everybody. And I know for some of you it's going to be evening because you're in Australia, and some of you in America are probably still asleep, but hopefully you'll pick it up on the video. The first one is now up, as you've probably seen. Today, we're looking at sharing management, business, and personal challenges from the pandemic. My name is Richard Chaplin, and I am the founder and chief executive of the Managing Partners Forum. And we see this very much as a public good. We're really pleased to have brought together some fantastic presenters to share some insights, very much around how they are approaching what for most of us is a totally strange and unusual space. What I've said in the notes, you probably read them, is that one of the consequences of social distancing is that people feel isolated, often stressed, sometimes even mental health issues, at the same time are thirsty for knowledge and for direction. And today, given most of the people on the call are in firm-wide leaders or C-suite members at professional services firms, you are very much the people who are driving the agenda for many, many people. We're going to start off with a presentation from Meirion Jones, who, as you probably will know, spoke at last week's session, and he's been senior in-house client development strategy roles at some of the world's leading professional services firms. And he's going to be talking a little bit about how does somebody who's driving a really small firm approach all the various challenges created by the pandemic. Next, we'll hear from Francesca Lagerberg, who, again, some of you will remember was on the call last week, and she's the Global Leader Network Capabilities at Grant Thornton, appears a lot on the media, and she also basically focuses on growing the Grant Thornton member firms around the world. She's a frequent commentator on the media and writes extensively on women in business and topical tax issues, and has been on lots of government and tax committees. So thank you, Francesca, for joining us again. Our third presenter is Chris Blythe. Chris is an expert in the world of property, engineering, and construction. He led the Chartered Institute of Building, CIOB, for about 20 years and focused on not just the building in the traditional sense, but also it's in the industry's vital role in social mobility, job creation, quality of life, and even modern slavery. So Chris, welcome, and he's an OBE, as you'll see, for his work. Shay McConnon, psychologist. He's authored 18 books on personal development. He was voted top speaker by the Academy of Chief Executives, founder of McConnon International. And his real focus is on team morale systems and how can you help build that and personal resilience. Our next speaker, Marcia King, she's Deputy Director and she's of PBS. She's really the point person for our sector into the world. So from government to our sector. So what are we going to talk about today? Well, these are some of the issues that have been raised by you guys, and we're talking 531 registrants from 351 organizations in 13 countries. Curious how only 1, 3, and 5 appear in those 3 sets of numbers. That's me being a mathematician, I guess. Business continuity, communication through novel channels. You can't just nudge people after the meeting to make things move forward in the way that possibly was quite useful in the past. Government support measures, hopefully we can cover those if she can, Marcia can join us. BD strategies, I know we touched on those a bit last week. Managing costs, maintaining productivity. Now that's a topic that wasn't really around last week, but now people are saying, how do I make sure we can be productive when we've got such a disparate workforce spread? And finally, and this is really part of the answer maybe in the question of productivity, what can we do to both improve team morale, but also personal resilience? Some of you will notice that we had a presentation from a finance director. Unfortunately, he's been called into a meeting, but when it comes to it, I will be taking through some of the points that he raised so that we can actually pick up and understand what it is that the finance director is going through as well. So I'm going to stop sharing my slides now and ask you over to Meirion. Thank you.
Thanks very much indeed, Richard, and good morning, everybody. Just to warn you that I have a bit of a sore throat and a bit of a cough, so I might be coughing occasionally during this, and if so, I hope it's not going to deafen you. You may remember those who were on last week, I talked, being a one-man band as I am, about the shock of suddenly finding my client base effectively dry up. So the last week, Richard wants to talk in this kind of video diary context. The last week has been spending coming to terms with that and kind of drawing on the kind of reserves of resilience that I spent a lot of time coaching my coachees about. So I knew that I really needed some resilience training when last Sunday morning I got an email from Ocado. For those of you not in the UK, it's an online grocery delivery firm, saying that my delivery had been cancelled, and just absolutely losing it. kind of storming around, shouting at the world, effectively raising my fists and screaming. I became a cartoon character. And I realized at that point that it was about time that I went back to resilient basis and started to interrogate some of the stories that I was telling myself about this kind of what felt at the time as a catastrophe. So I spent quite a lot of time since then just doing that. I've realized that a lot of what I was feeling was stories of terrible things that might happen, the effect on the business, the fact that the work might dry up, who knows what was going to happen. So instead I've started asking myself questions, and I started coaching myself, and I've started to find that by rewriting these stories, rewiring my responses to these challenges, I have taken control. It seemed to me that there are certain lessons here that can be applied more widely. Because in the last week, I've also been doing quite a lot of coaching with individuals, partners who might be described in Richard's terms as being in middle manager roles, practice area leaders, heads of industry sectors, and so on, many of whom seem to be experiencing many of the same challenges. So I spent the last week talking about resilience, about mindfulness, about exercise, about diet, about acting and behaving constructively, but most importantly, about interrogating the stories that people tell themselves. And also, as, if you like, manager coaches, helping the people that they're managing and leading to interrogate their own stories. This applies particularly to one of my clients, which is not in the UK, but it's in a Scandinavian country. And many of the people in that organization are young. It's a very young country in terms of demographics. So a lot of the people at that firm, mid-ranking associates, find themselves at home in bedsits, in apartments, on their own, with less to do than they might have to do normally, starting to catastrophize, starting to fall victim to the stories that they're telling. So I was coaching a partner during the week, asking this partner how they were communicating with their team members. And the partner said, well, generally okay. I think they're fine. And I asked the partner, how do you know that? And they said, well, I asked them and they say they're okay. And I asked her, how are you? And she said, I'm okay. And I said, tell me a bit more. And she said, well, I am finding it a bit of a struggle. I'm new to this role. I'm not quite sure how I should be responding. I'm not quite sure how well my message is landing. I'm not quite sure what I should be doing. I'm not quite sure that I justify myself being here. I'm starting to feel a little bit of imposter syndrome. And I said, that's odd, isn't it? Because at the start, you said you're okay. And then within 45 seconds, you're revealing all these concerns that you have. Do you think it's likely that some of the people who are telling you they're okay might be experiencing some of the same concerns, some of the same doubts? And I think the penny dropped. And I guess what I'm coming to here is that, as Richard said earlier, there's a need for a new channel of communication, new forms, new modalities of communication. I think that there's a role here in terms of the manager or the leader as coach. And I don't think that this is something that lands naturally with professional services practitioners. They're problem solvers, as we talked about last week. They like to direct. They like to come to quick conclusions. They like to agree the next steps. They like to know what's happening. And being a coach is going into unknown territory. But equally, as we've heard, social interaction, being heard, being attended to, I think is critical for resilience. So these are the lessons I've learned this week. Listen to myself, interrogate my stories, encourage managers to listen to the people that they're managing and leading and interrogate theirs. Richard.
Wow, your timekeeping is immaculate. Fantastic. Francesca, do you want to talk us about your week? How's it been?
Hey, hi, Richard. Hi, everybody. Nice to be back. It has been an intriguing week, hasn't it? I think what we're seeing with various firms right around the world is that after that initial, oh my goodness, what's going on, people are really diving into how do we keep our business resilient. So lots and lots of conversations, lots of discussions around business resilience. And this isn't around your traditional continuity plan that I think all of us have gone through multiple times over the years. This is around something quite different, because I think where we're getting to now is that intriguing piece about how long is this going to go on for. I work in an international organization, so we have offices all around the world, and I've spoken to quite a lot of our CEOs around the world this week as well. And it's fascinating to see how different regions and different countries are coming to this whole pandemic in slightly different ways and very much at different times, and they're learning from each other. So I think there's a piece here around people looking at their business continuity planning in a whole new way. And I really like the way that someone described it to me this week. They said, plan for the worst, but hope for the best. So scenario planning does seem to be the order of the day. So what do you need to do right here, right now, to make sure your business is going to cope? And a lot of us were talking about that last Friday, immediate plans, how you manage what you have to do right now when work is beginning to trickle away in some cases, or is very different in many others. And now it's more about what do you do for the next couple of weeks, then what do you look at for the next couple of months? And then that really hard piece is what's your hardcore scenario planning for 6 months and out, when you don't know what the world's going to look like, you don't know where we're going to go, and you are really making some very educated guesses. Let's pick up on productivity. That's an issue many of you have raised. I think all of us are looking long and hard at how are we utilizing the people we've got and ourselves in this time. And this isn't about working out who stays and who goes. This is about how do we share resources in a thoughtful way so that people are protected in terms of their jobs where that's possible, but also people are kept being busy. They've got things that are constructive and helpful to do, as opposed to just being busy. So I'm seeing a lot of firms now really using that good old accountant fallback, the timesheet. Who knew that would come back into fashion? But doing it on a daily basis, really looking at utilization, really trying to share resource, and encouraging people to be very honest about how busy they are, so they can be genuinely reassigned, reused, reskilled to work in other areas during this period of time. So a lot happening around that. Mentioned scenario planning right at the top, but short-term, medium-term, long-term scenario planning seems absolutely essential right now. If you haven't done it, I'm sure you're thinking about it or working towards it, and making sure that you're very, very clear that this is a new world for us. So nothing's off the table, being original, being thoughtful. And that could fall into everything like giving that protection and comfort to people that they will have a job for a set period of time, that where governments are offering state aid, that might be viable. But also it may mean that there's some job sharing or part-time work or some reduced pay or some reduced hours for people to enable everyone to have long-term benefit. Those of you who remember the financial crisis will know that some of that shorter working, reduced pay enabled many people to keep jobs. Filling the vacuum with communication is really important. Communicate. If people don't hear what's happening, they often fear the worst, and very often they fear something far worse than really is happening at the time. And that's last but not least from me, Richard, on the client solution side of things. I know often in the accounting world, our tendency is to want to find a new revenue stream, a new source of income. And I think the thing that's really come across to me incredibly strongly is that, as we should always be doing, listening to clients at this moment in time is the most important. Not pushing solutions and products that actually aren't what they want, or they're not ready for, or they categorically don't want to be sold stuff. What they do want is to have professionals listening to them, helping them where it's appropriate, but also making sure that they're giving advice that's relevant rather than something that's just going to make sure their revenue streams hold up. So listening, not selling, and looking very, very closely at how everybody can work across their own silos to be really effective. There you go, Richard. That's all for me for the moment.
Oh, you guys are amazing with your time. I don't know how you do it. Fantastic. Just as I mentioned earlier that we were going to talk a little bit about the finance director priorities. I'll just again read them out quickly if I may. It won't take very long. First of all, ensure that everyone is safe and encouraged to abide by the government recommendations. You don't want your lawyers being locked up for failure to comply with some edict. Keep the lights on. I know that can be hard if your building is in lockdown, but buildings are still maintaining key operational processes, particularly around matters. Don't let the process by which matters are being delivered to clients fall over, because they will notice very, very quickly, and you may have people who are self-isolating, may not be able to help. So make sure you focus on your key operational process by which you deliver the services to clients. Picking up one of the points, plan for a worst case scenario for liquidity, and definitely speak to your banks. Don't sort of leave it too late for that. Cybercrime hasn't been picked up, but that's another one. Make sure that everyone is very aware of the increased risk of cybercrime. We've heard quite a lot about people spamming, sort of, send money to whatever, but actually cybercrime is a much bigger space. So try and be aware of that, because with everybody now much more sort of outside the nice little hub that you normally have, much higher risk of that happening. Double down on your credit control. You need to bring the cash in, but also think about how you're going to deal with the clients that can't pay their bills. There will be some. So how are you going to deal with them? Are you going to be tough? Are you going to be lenient? Which ones really matter? Which ones are you going to have to, unfortunately, maybe just write off and move on rather than wasting time? So think through that one. Keep everybody positive. Keep your team positive, and encourage them to be the best they can, do the best they can. Don't expect perfection, that's an illusion, but just ask everybody to do the best they can, and they'll rise to that challenge. Give them the outcome, maybe perhaps not so much the process. Be at the top of your game for comms, but remember that you've got to balance the need, on the one hand, for financial hygiene, on the other hand, don't create panic. That doesn't work. And finally, ration your own time, so you create some space to cope with what are genuine emergencies, because all too often something appears on the face of it to be an emergency. It takes a lot of time, but actually it could have been dealt with differently, or somebody else could have done it. But just keep that little bit of space in your day to deal with real genuine emergencies, because sadly some of them will come along. So that's a little bit of feedback from the finance director. I know there's quite a few finance directors on the call. Andrew, apologies he can't be with us, but he thought he'd drop me those notes, so hopefully you'll find those helpful. Perhaps I can turn now to Chris and talk a little about how the property world are approaching this particular scenario that we're in.
Thank you, Richard, and good morning. The construction and property world, or as we like to call it, the built environment, was facing a number of serious challenges before all this started. And what's happening now is that it's making it worse by far. Just to give you an idea of some of those headwinds we had, the issues around leasehold and shared ownership, quality, and the proposals for a new home ombudsman, and the fallout from Grenfell. And this has come in two forms. On the construction side, what we see is a system that's broken at all levels, including regulation, quality, and professionalism. And we have a business model that is frankly a shambles. Contractors make 2 to 4% profit, 15 to 20% return on capital employed. Developers, house builders are making 30% and delivering rubbish. And we've got an industry where 90% of the workers are not employed by the name on the door or on the fence. So heavily subcontracted from professional services to trades. And sometimes you find that professional services behave like trades and vice versa. And the whole name of the game is around risk transfer. So it is really, when something like this happens, it's terrible. Added to that, we've got poor reputation, not done delivery on major projects. We've got Crossrail. And as a result of the Carillion collapse a couple of years ago, we've got two big hospitals, Royal Liverpool and Midland Met, which are now due to be finished in 2022, 5 years late. And wouldn't that have made a difference to thousands of people's lives? And at the start of this, Richard sort of mentioned my interest in quality of life. And for me, construction is about quality of life, pure and simple. But we have a paradox in that, we have world-leading professional services companies in architecture, engineering, and sustainability. Now, I apologise if I'm just going to pick some wounds for people, but I think actually in the context of what's going on, some of you may need to know that some of your staff have actually got these issues, and they may be telling you about these issues. But leasehold is a basket case. It is, the Competition and Markets Authority produced a report absolutely slating it, and the property developers, solicitors involved in all of that, there's a move on that. We've also got leasehold, which is freehold, but with all the features of leasehold, and shared ownership, which is probably worse than anything going anyway. And then on the construction side, quality and notable failures in quality and home safety, Persimmon stands out. They had an independent report that, you know, said their culture, their company culture, is a cause of quality issues, regarding itself more as a land assembler and seller of houses than a house builder. So, wow, you know, what a place to start. So hence why we're looking at new home ombudsman legislation. And then following on from Grenfell, of course, we've now got all these tower blocks, some of them quite new, with flammable cladding. And, you know, that's part of regulatory and professional competence failures. So people have got unsellable homes, they can't get mortgages on it, there are large costs coming onto the leaseholders to remedy it, and they run the risk of forfeiture. Now, this was recognised a little bit in the budget 2 weeks ago by the Chancellor putting £1 billion aside to help people on top of the 400 million that was put aside for the ACM cladding. But we've got 500,000 people caught in this trap. So, you know, it's not ones or twos, it's massive. And it's having a massive detrimental impact on people's lives, because they could have to stump up tens of thousands of pounds to remedy something which wasn't their problem. So looking at the impact of COVID-19, well, property market is dead, residential is dead, social distancing kills the viewing, and you can't do anything. And the government advice at the moment is for people not to move. And today is one of the busiest moving days. So it'll be interesting to see who is moving, who is not moving today. But the advice is don't move. And that causes all sorts of problems in terms of completions, money transfers, and what have you. On the sort of the construction side, professional services are doing okay. They're doing like all the other professional services firms. They're hunkering down. You know, many firms already had systems in place for remote working, and especially those with remote offices. But you're seeing recruitment freezes, reductions in pay, particularly for senior people, bonuses frozen or deferred, and holidays being brought forward. The challenges will be that once you stop building, the money flows stop. And so you've got some sites working at the moment, some mothballed. Government advice is a bit contradictory. And the Construction Leadership Council, which is the construction equivalent of the Professional Services Business Council, have produced some guidelines. And, you know, people I've talked to, they go along with the official line that if it can be done safely, do it. But unofficially, they all tell me it's bonkers. We know we can't do it. So, you know, we're caught in that dilemma. And public sentiment is going very much against the construction at the moment, because they feel that people going to work and crowding tube trains and all that is actually unsafe. But as we're looking for the recovery, this is the most dangerous time in the construction industry. Construction companies can survive a recession. They're well practiced at doing it, and they're very good at doing it, but they generally fail in the recovery. So their priority is cash conservation. Contractors have little assets, so borrowing is difficult. But I can guarantee the government will do what it can to protect its supply chain. And that was a lesson learned following Meirion. But it could be 4 to 5 months before cash starts to flow. And with those existing headwinds, the pressure is really on the industry and the professions. And what we will see coming out of this, the legacy, well, I think there's going to be the inevitable increase in litigation about delays and disruption. And this is going to be a real challenge, really, you know, whether what is legal is right against what is legal, against what is right, and does the contract trump the public interest, particularly with shutting down people on public safety, shutting down sites on public safety grounds. Long term for the industry, will it revert back to its old ways and the crisis is over? Well, for me, it's 50-50. Fragmentation in habits, integration, and from my experience, you know, in the construction industry, built environment industry, 50 construction professional bodies and associations. And with our subcontracting culture, it is easier to continue than change. But there will be consolidation, because in construction, no one is too big to fail. But the one good thing is we always need to build and rebuild the built environment. So there'll always be an industry of the future. What shape it will be, I don't know. Richard.
Well, I think we're going to be interesting to catch up with you as this as the episodes continue, Chris, because I think that there's a lot of issues there. Perhaps the one around the impact that some of our people may be feeling with leasehold issues or their own property being a sort of cause of concern for them, rippling into their feeling of how of their general morale, which kind of segues quite nicely into Shay. Welcome, Shay, who's going to talk a little bit about team morale and personal resilience, and how you can actually, as the leader, look to enhance those absolutely fundamental issues in the current climate.
Thanks, Richard. Morning, everybody. And as Richard said, I'd like to kind of focus on the people side of the current challenges. We're in a new situation and there's new questions to be asked, such as how do we maintain team morale and motivation levels when people are working remotely? How do we discover what are the issues for those workers? How do they stay connected with each other as a team, with you as the team leader? How do we ensure productivity remains high? This has got to be the consequence of everything we do. And leaders, how do they work remotely and yet continue to develop their people? How do we balance all of that? Now, I've spent the last 30 years working in organizations face to face with people around lots of people issues. So what I've done is just, what can we do which is online that's going to work and help us achieve and answer those questions? And I've come up with three steps. Number one, listen to the needs of your people, and that resonates with what Meirion has been talking about. Number two, empathize and problem solve on the needs. And the third is stay connected, getting the team to stay connected with each other. So I'd just like to briefly comment on each of those. If you don't listen to the needs of your people, what's going to happen? People are going to feel isolated, unsupported, and be non-productive. So I've created just a little diagnostic around needs, because all my experience tells me unless you give something a bit of a structure, it's not going to work. A blank page doesn't work. And again, you know, Meirion mentioned this, ask a simple question. I'm fine, no problem. Maybe we need to go a bit deeper. You know, how's it going? What do you need from me? And some simple questions like that will help to flush out the needs. Then once the needs are on the table, really, really important, we empathize and problem solve on those needs. Yes? So how do we actually make the difference? What needs to happen? Some very simple coaching type questions to, again, focus on the individual. And this will flush out their real needs. And it will be a slow process. First time around, they may not feel free to be totally honest with you. And our job, of course, is to make it safe for them to be open and honest with you. And while we're flushing out their needs, that's really, really important to their motivation and productivity levels. But we must always remember the business need has priority over an individual's needs. And if you like, the mantra is meet the business needs without neglecting the needs of people. And the third bit is stay connected. So basically, I've created a few little activities, team activities, which can be done online and real simple. So for example, imagine we're a team this morning. We'd say take Richard as the focal person, and I'd say to Chris, what one thing about Richard that you're glad he does? What's his gift to the team? What do you appreciate about Richard? And then Chris says what he wants to say, and then it moves on to Meirion saying what he wants, values in Richard, and so on and so forth. So some simple things like that, and keeping the team morale high, really, really important in these difficult, if you like, restricted times as well. But following some sort of a structure like those three steps, it will grow openness, trust, collaboration, and leadership. And if there's one thing we need in these challenging times, people deserve to be well led in these challenging times. And one last little point, not everybody, some people like isolation. They like working on their own. That's how they give of their best. So again, we need to cater for their needs as well as the people who need affiliation, have affiliation needs. Richard, back to you.
Oh, that's wonderful. I hope that we're now able to bring Marcia in. Marcia, are you on the line? I
am, yes. Oh.
Again, I know you're not necessarily expecting to say very much, but do you want to give us a very quick sense as to where government is currently thinking in terms of supporting our sector? That would be really, really helpful.
Yeah, so can everybody hear me okay?
I think so.
I'm not sure whether I'm okay. So as you would be aware, that there's been quite a lot of reaction from government in relation to kind of a number of different schemes that are being put in place. including the kind of recent announcements last night from the Chancellor around kind of the self-employed. We are all working on trying to kind of support our sectors, gather intelligence, both in terms of the impact, but also how these schemes are kind of working and whether there is any ways to smooth the processes. You can appreciate these things have been set up at pace, and there will be a slight iteration of how those kind of processes work. As I said, I think there's a number of things that we kind of want to understand from business so that we can help kind of direct support in the right way. So that's first of all, as I said, the kind of impact on your business. We know some of the kind of broader impacts, but we're finding there's more specific and kind of niche impacts which people are trying to work through, and kind of getting sight of that will kind of help to build a bigger picture of how we can kind of government can support. I think we're also interested in kind of the what you're hearing from your clients, so as kind of professional and business services providing kind of that support to clients. Actually, are there things that they are coming up with that it is worth feeding back in? I think the other things are around, again, kind of specific government levers that might be able to help. So we're thinking about kind of regulatory easement. And I don't want to say that all of them can happen, but if there kind of are any suggestions of things that might actually support or help people in the shorter term, and we are kind of interested in that. And then finally, as I said, on the kind of bigger treasury schemes themselves, how is this working on the ground? So a lot of these are obviously having to be delivered by kind of commercial banks, and we are just wanting to kind of gather evidence on that.
Okay, thanks, Marcia. There's a little bit of background noise on that one. I think we'll probably try and do a transcript for people, so at least they get to hear it later, and we might get to sort of do something on the video with you just to make sure people can hear, because I'll mute you if I may. Okay, but we'll come back in a second. So thank you very much for that contribution. Right, we're now kind of back to the panel session. We've got just under half an hour. We've got some questions. Thank you very much for the questions which people have put in. If you recall, when we spoke earlier, we looked at the number of issues that were being raised by the 531 registrants. We looked at business continuity, communications through novel channels. Meirion picked that one up, I know. Government support measures, again, we just heard from Marcia, which is great. BD strategies, managing costs, which obviously we had the finance director perspective on that, productivity, and then finally Shay is talking about team morale and personal resilience. I mean, I think probably the one thing that I would be interested to hear is this sort of, again, across the panel, is what do you see as the your number one priority for you for the next sort of 2 or 3 working days, because the thing is moving so quickly. Where are you going to be actually putting your personal effort? Just any of you, please, come on in.
Yeah, sure. Rich, let me kick off, and I'm sure others will want to jump in as well. And I'd like to merge it into one of the other questions that people have raised on the online question piece as well. I think at the moment, it's really about looking ahead to what you do in the next 6 weeks, and then beginning to think about what you do in the next 3 months. So if that hasn't happened already, now's the perfect time to do that scenario planning, because some of the here and now we've been working on for the last couple of weeks, but it's really about what do you do when you get to the point that you're looking about how you can keep your people engaged, how you can meet your payroll, how you can do all the things you need to do to keep your business running. So scenario planning, looking at the worst case scenario, looking at the better case, how can you manage and keep your business resilient? Someone raised a question on the Q&A. What are people doing around reducing the earnings of their partners, or reducing staff, or reducing hours worked? I've seen around the world, I've seen all those different issues being reviewed and looked at. The first thing is to model, to forecast, to work out what have you got, how long does it last you for, what's your revenue streams going to look like, what's your new forecast, what's your new budget. You do the modeling, and then you can work out, do we need to put people onto reduced hours? Are there ways that we can keep people in work using some state aid opportunities? What do we need to do for partners? In the current climate, I don't think any partner's expecting to get the same pay they got last year, and the drawings they're going to be looking at. For some people, it might be, do they need to do capital calls to give them a bit more liquidity, looking at their cash flow, looking at their bank lines, all the things you do in times of crisis. You work your way through, you're quite systematic about it, and you make sure that you're considering all the options. How can you keep your business resilient? Because you can't help your people if your business isn't resilient. So how would you get that resilience going? And then how do you plan for, if this carries on for, say, 6 weeks, 3 months, 6 months, what do those different plans look like? And I'm sure lots of you are doing a huge amount of planning around that at the moment. And that's going to be my core focus over the next couple of days, Richard.
Thanks. Anybody else want to chip in with their thoughts?
Richard, Meirion here. Two things. One, what I'm talking with my clients about. Two, what I'm doing myself. As far as clients are concerned, it's probably, I suspect, a little bit too soon to be thinking about this. I think that everything that we've heard this morning, especially from Francesca, is still being considered. There is still so much uncertainty. But at a certain point, firms are going to want to start thinking about how they can partner with their clients as we enter this new world. A number of my contacts, a number of my clients have said words to the effect, when this is all over, ... as if to say, we'll just be going back to business as usual, the way things were. I think that quite clearly that's not going to be the case. It's going to be a different world. So how are our clients going to be adapting to that? How can we as firms, as advisors, partner with clients to help them to plot what that path is going to be, how best to take advantage of it, how to plan for the worst that might happen, and as Francesca said, expect for the best. In other words, think in terms of bouncing into the rebound. There will be opportunities, there will be challenge, but there'll be opportunities. So how can firms and advisors work with clients to do that? And then from a personal basis, I'm going to be closing my business, Client Critical, and I'm going to be setting up a new one, focusing on some of these issues around resilience. I think Shay's point about the importance of morale and resilience and communication is going to be the critical deciding issue between successful firms and firms which effectively go by the wayside. So that's my 2 penneth worth.
One of the lessons I've learned over the years is if you want something to be sustained, systemize it. How often have I left programs, oh yes, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, and I do the other. I get back to business, the shit hits the fan, and I've forgotten all about my good intentions. So to me, over the coming weeks, I really want to follow through on the needs agenda, the resilience agenda, and systemize it in some way, making it easy for people to engage with it, making it easy for people to be successful in their resilience agendas.
Thank you. Chris, do you want to add any thoughts about where your priorities are?
Yeah, well, I'm a non-executive chair of a small organisation that part of its business is having apprentices on construction sites, and another part is doing work around community safety and construction logistics. And of course, all that is all about people and being close to people. So a lot of that is just mothballed now, and we can hunker back and plan and make better what we were going to do and take the opportunity to do it. We pulled all the apprentices off site. I mean, we couldn't get assurances from the hosts that they could keep people in the condition that we would want ourselves to be kept in. And I suspect that by and large, I think most construction sites will probably shut down, in the next week, if those who haven't already shut down. So I don't think there's an issue there. But the message really is that, we care about the people who we're responsible for, and they need to feel it. So a strategy about making sure the apprentices are kept busy while they're off, so that they've got things to do rather than just sitting around, and we're ready to reactivate them so they can complete their apprenticeships and develop their careers. So, but it's making that. But the other point is providing a lot of support to my chief executive, who, for a lot of people, this is a situation which they've never experienced, or I've never experienced it, but together, you can provide, some effective support. But the danger is not become executive in the process, and that's always going to be the challenge, is maintaining the barrier. So he's still in charge, you're there as comfort, support, and to mentor, because that's the way we're going to see our way through it.
And interestingly, I think the idea of the professional services advisor as the consigliere to their client, rather than just we deliver services or products, is going to, again, differentiate. Going back to Meirion's point about resilience, it's also around the nature of the relationship you will be able to have with your client. Because the truth is, if this country is 80% small businesses or professional or services firms, then they're going through exactly the same issues. Now, it may not be the regular person you're in contact with. It may not be your frontline financial controller if you're an accountant, or a general counsel if you're a lawyer. But hey, the management team of your client will be going through exactly the same challenges that you will. And they may not have all these experts that you do to help you. So do reach out as the management team of your clients to talk to the management team at your clients. And if you don't know them, they will just think of you as a key supplier, but you could do a whole lot more than that. So do actually think about extending the relationships, in rather than just being more sort of what I call practical matter-based relationships, and look very carefully at, am I really helping my client? And that isn't an organization. There's no such thing as an organization, only people. So which people are you engaging with at your client becomes a really critical issue. And a lot of them will have exactly all the issues everyone's been talking about in spades in their own organizations, because let's face it, this country is 80% services. So we're all pretty much in the same boat. So okay, that's my Hemsworth. But I don't know, again, if you have any thoughts, Marcia, from the sort of government perspective as to where you're putting your effort, or where I suspect, as you said, everything is incredibly busy at the moment. So putting programs in place in 1 month that would normally take 6 or 9. So again, if hopefully you can, if you want to chip in on where you think your priorities might be over the next few days, that would be great.
Richard, I've got a feeling that line may have dropped. I think
it may have dropped. No worries. Okay. Well, we heard.
Richard,
we did.
Can I pick up anyway. a couple of the questions, if that's okay?
Yeah, please do.
I'm going to put 2 of them together, and then I'm going to pick up on the scenario planning question too. 2 really great questions. One around innovation and what are people really doing in this time, and they're sort of linked. I love the comment that says they've received more marketing material than they've ever received in the past, in the last few weeks, which always looks like BD departments being very busy. But I think the point was well made. What do clients really want at the moment? The chances are what they don't want is lots of marketing material. What they do want is someone to pick up the phone and listen to them, or them to have those conversations, which are much more about what's the real need, what's the discussion. And we all know that in times of crisis, the professional services firms that stand by their clients and listen to their clients get the long-term win rather than just the quick sell. So I think that one is a really good point that's being made. And another question is picking up around innovation, and others may have good things to add on this too. You know, what are people seeing around innovation? A lot of it is just based off, that I'm seeing, is based off really helping people around business resilience, giving support around how they can help you in times of cash flow crises, verification, new ways of working. Feels a little bit early, but lots of picking up work that actually gives them the support and the help they need around how to deal with a business crisis. And again, it really ties into that first point. If you ask the client, talk to the client, you're far more likely to find out what they're really looking for, rather than pushing things out. And Richard, others may want to add to that, and then I'm happy to come back on variables and scenario planning a little bit later on the call.
Sure. Does anybody want to pick up the innovation or marketing, or perhaps Meirion, you might want to give some thoughts on marketing, given your background?
On that marketing one, and I've just very quickly answered that question about the volume of expert material that's being produced. I very much doubt the value of that, other than to simply say to the client, we're here. But 100 other firms are saying exactly the same thing. Why does listening matter? Why is it so important? Well, I mean, Shay just summarized it really well. It creates empathy, it builds rapport, it builds trust and understanding. But what it also does, from a psychological standpoint, is the person being listened to is given the opportunity to get a greater sense of control over their circumstances. When you're being listened to, you formulate new ideas, you make new neural connections, you start to see new opportunities, new options open to you. Being heard gives you a sense of agency. And I think that this is as important as anything. It's almost less important what's being said, less important what's being listened to, than simply the opportunity to express oneself and be listened to. And I think if you can do that from a marketing perspective, then that is really powerful.
Shay, do you want to add to that? Again, you need to unmute first.
I would just echo what Meirion is saying. It's the fact that we are talking and I feel safe to talk to you rather than what we talk about. It's that, if you like, meta communication, which is the critical bit. I feel safe. I feel I can trust you. I feel you genuinely are interested. And that just transforms the relationship.
Can I add something, Richard? I think with what's gone on, everything's been derailed, and therefore there's freedom because you're not stuck going down the same old lines. And what I'm hearing from people is all sorts of different ways of approaching problems, which they probably wouldn't have done before because there was always a conventional way. But convention has gone a little bit, and I think the challenge will be, once everything gets back to normal, is corralling some of that back in. And the point was made about systemizing stuff as well. But at the moment, people are being able to think different, coming from different directions, and as Shay says, listening to people, giving people the opportunity to be heard. I think there's a lot coming out of that. And for me, that's the nub of the innovation, not necessarily new technology, what have you, but just people thinking in a different way.
There's also an issue of time, because actually we did spend a lot of time traveling to meetings. We commuted. And actually, if you think about how many hours you have, probably there's more hours now for many people than there were before, because a lot of time was dead time, if you like. So how you use that time usefully. And again, you have got time to listen, I think, is the way I think about it from a management point of view. You're not constantly in meetings in the way that you possibly were before. Of course, there'll be video meetings, that's fine, but again, they have a slightly different cadence of their own as well. They're much more about sharing knowledge rather than necessarily developing relationships, which is always going to be part of a sort of face-to-face meeting. So I think there is the management style, the leadership style will have to change, and I think this again perhaps picks up the point of communication and if you're somebody who is used to communicating in a very, what shall I say, kind of soft, friendly, chatty, let's get together and talk about this approach. And that has huge merits generally, but that channel no longer exists. I mean, how can do you just start sending out a blog and you start doing webinars? I mean, is that actually going to work? And again, I love Meirion's thoughts on that, because I think that's a whole area of communication, which is, very novel communication, I think is the term I might use for some people, but at the end of the day, if you don't communicate, then the silence is worse often. So, and have you got any thoughts on that, Meirion?
Well, by all means, do a blog, produce material, but think about what's going to go in it. Don't just kind of knee-jerk. And I bet that if we were to do a random survey of the materials that are being produced by firms, as technically brilliant, as well written, as well designed, as they no doubt are, I bet you would find it's difficult to put a cigarette paper between a lot of them in terms of differentiation and message. So if you're going to be doing these things, think about what you can say and do which actually offers value. That is to say, is different from what everyone else is saying. Now, you might be able to formulate that in teams within your organization, but I bet you'd be better able to formulate it if you did some sense checking with your clients, and perhaps started to work in partnership with some clients to produce some of these materials. Someone has said in the questions and answers, I'm reminded our partners have produced or had a ton of marketing material to use as touch points. I think that's great. Use the materials as touch points rather than as panacea. These are opportunities to get in touch with clients, to get deeper, rather than think, oh yeah, that's the marketing bit done, now I can go on to other things. No, this is not business as usual. This is not just using past solutions and hoping that they'll work in this scenario. I think that this is a fantastic opportunity to deliver on what David Maister was talking about doing 30 years ago, which is actually getting much closer to our clients. And going to Shay's point, if this can be systematized, if it starts to be implanted into the DNA of the way firms do their BD, then I think something wholly good will have come out of this calamity.
Richard, I think on the communication, I mean, in most organizations, probably the biggest complaint most people have is communication is poor. And that's when it's a normal situation, and it's with spades it is now, right, in terms of the ability to communicate. But the challenge with communication is not so much sending stuff out, it's about having people listening and hearing. And at the moment the BBC are sending a vast amount of material out one way or another, but it's not making any difference to us. They're communicating, but as we're not receiving it, it has no impact. And I think the challenge is creating an environment where people want to take the communication, and it actually has appeal to them. So it's actually making it fit. And I agree with Meirion, there's a massive stuff coming out, but a lot of it may touch where it fits, but you've got to work much harder on that quality and substance of the communication, that people will switch on the radio to hear it and interact with it.
I often think that communication is a bit like an oil refinery, in the sense that you have a number of elements. You have messages that need to go from A to B. A is you, B is the client. And you have to make sure those messages will resonate with B, one, and then you have to build pumps or blocks into the system to make sure that all of them get to the client more or less at the same time. And that's the art of communication. It's a science and an art at the same time. And I think the key word to me is resonate. In other words, unless those messages resonate, unless you really put yourself in the mind of the person whom you're seeking to share knowledge with, you end up in a broadcasting space, hence BBC being the B, being the second B being broadcasting, because that's what they do really, really well. But if we try and broadcast to our clients, I think we've got problems. It's about engaging very much one-on-one. And those relationships, it's all very well having a CRM system. The R for CRM stands for relationships. Focus on them, in my mind.
Richard, can I pick up on a couple of other questions that are coming in as well? There's some really nice questions coming through. Someone has asked about variables on scenario planning. What kind of things are people looking at in terms of their scenario planning, and all the obvious ones around cash flow, utilization, hours worked, productivity, obviously are the headline ones. But I think there's also a piece around, is it timing? Is this about a 3-month strategy or a 6-month strategy, which enables you to look medium term and longer term, and also around transferable skills, depending on your organization, how transferable are the skills of your people? Do you have people who really are on the bench already and they've got no way of getting off it? Do you have people who can help each other out, really getting into the detail of what can people do in terms of their skill levels? And obviously there are many other factors to do around liquidity in there too. And I just want to pick up on a question someone's raised about the UK scheme, particularly the one that was announced yesterday, the bit of state aid coming in from the UK for the self-employed. They're clearly at a pretty early stage in terms of what they've announced, which is why it's coming into effect in June, but being backdated. There's been some fantastic stuff on Twitter overnight around how that might or might not work, and I'd highly recommend looking at things that are going out from people like Heather Self or Rebecca Bennyworth on this. And the point was raised about husband and wife teams. There does seem to be some issue around around certain entities. Can they really claim it or not? Very early to give advice on that, but we'll be getting a lot more detail coming out soon. But there does seem to be some situations where that state aid won't help everyone you might expect. So in answer to that question, I think there's a lot more detail that people are going to need to know if it works or not.
Yeah, as I think I mentioned, Francesca there's a Grant Thornton tax team in the UK and globally. So anything tax related, it's definitely somebody worth talking to. So thank you for that more technical insight from an area which is going to be quite important to. If one looks at the pyramid of professional services firms, there are a few hundred who employ a few thousand people, and very, very, very large numbers who are literally 1, 2, 3 people of Meirion Jones's businesses. But he can just say, oh, I'm closing that one down and starting another one, just like that. So, hey, that they have to be flexible, I think. But
Richard, just on Meirion here, I would just like to make Francesca the offer to do my tax returns on a pro bono basis for the next couple of years.
You don't have to answer that one, don't worry. So anyway, we're kind of coming into the last few minutes now. And again, firstly, thank you very much for all the various questions that have been coming in. Just a little bit, perhaps, of background now, what we're doing. As some of you will be aware from a note I sent around yesterday, we've got a situation where we can really share a lot of ideas in a call like this, and it's fantastic just to bounce ideas, and honesty and insighting, useful, interesting, all those words are coming back, which is great. But actually sometimes you want to go into a topic in a little bit more depth. And so what we've done is we've been looking at how we can actually help you hear from experts. And there are three people who have kindly agreed to be the experts. And what we're doing is basically they're happening from Monday of next week, Monday, Wednesday, and then the following Monday, etc. And the first one is Meirion himself, who's agreed to spend about 20 minutes talking about communication strategies. These are at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, which allows North American people to join them. On the Wednesday, Shay is going to talk about team morale enhancement. And then on the 6th of April, Gerard Drentz of Norman Partners, who are, I would say, one of the leading, if not the leading firm on scenario planning, are talking about scenario planning and how you can actually approach something which is a whole science in its own space and is a little bit more than just playing with Excel and looking what emerges. So do sort of sign up for those Hear from Experts series, because what we think is that they will complement the weekly one, which remains the 1 hour sort of flagship. But then during the week on the Monday, Wednesday at 5 o'clock, we'll have a very short, will also be recorded, but at least that way you'll be able to sort of kind of get up to speed in a bit more depth into some of these key topics. There are going to be more following through. We're hopefully going to get Brian Meirion of Positive Group, who's talking about resilience, who again, some of you will know is probably one of the key leaders in that space. So what we're going to try and do is complement the rather more chatty weekly one, the video diaries, the chance to get to hear how people are actually dealing with a totally strange situation, and complement those with these free webinars, as they say. Again, all public good, which we think is really, really important. The second point I was going to make quickly is that we are also looking to make the recording available. We've had about 150, 200 people on the call today, which is great. We have 531 who have actually signed up. So what we've done is we've, in our management library, we've got a space with a COVID webinar videos, episode 1 in full there, taster as well. Episode 2 will be going up today quite soon, and there's a URL, a little short one, as you can see at the side, which I think I've shared with you, and there's a few board briefings and a couple of surveys and a few other bits and pieces. That's totally public. If you go into it and you then want to log in and you've registered for the these webinars, you you just go to this login, which I've put a rather sort of scriggly amateurish line just so that you click on there, and then you'll be able to see them, and they are 1 hour properly edited, and hopefully then you can look at them, share them, and as a group sort of kind of enjoy working with them. So I think probably from my point of view, we're just about at the end now. Just to say, first of all, hear from experts, so at least you know what we're doing. As I said, 30th of March, 1st of April, 6th of April, a registration there. And I hope you found it valuable, and please encourage your peers to register for future ones, because at the end of the day, I think we are doing something that is seen as valuable. We put on 150 new people in the last week, and I'd like to take the chance now just really to thank all our panelists, to thank Meirion, to thank Chris, to thank Francesca, Shay, Kazi, and obviously Marcia over the phone, and hopefully they will let government use Zoom. It's good enough for Boris, and it ought to be good enough for you. And thank you all for your time, and look forward to catching up next week. Bye for now.